The ground roared like a wild animal, furious and blind. Concrete cracked like glass underfoot. People screamed names into the dust, and no one answered. Latoya didn't run, she ran in. Blood ran down her forehead, stinging her eyes, but she didn't stop. She heard something. A groan, low and buried. Not a child this time, but a man. A white man. Half his body was crushed under twisted steel beams. No one else seemed to hear him. Maybe they did and turned away. She didn't. She got down on her knees, hands bleeding, pulling him inch by inch out of the rubble. He didn't speak, didn't open his eyes, just the faint rise and fall of breath. She didn't know his name, didn't need to. He was alive. That was enough. She didn't know yet, but dragging him from death's grip would also drag her into a life no one, not even she, could have imagined. People were running, screaming, pushing, covered in ash and fear. And Latoya ran too, but not away. She ran straight into it. "Get back!" someone yelled, grabbing her arm. She shook it off without looking. Her feet knew where they were going. The building had cracked like dry bread. Glass, steel, and concrete peeled open like a wound. It had taken the roof of the orphanage with it, and the soup kitchen out front was gone, buried in dust and bent metal. "Latoya! The kids, are you?" a woman cried behind her. "They're outside," Latoya said, breath ragged. "They got out!" The moment hung in the air, weightless. A crack split the ground behind them. Screams. She didn't stop. She stepped over what had been the wooden doorframe of the soup hall, now nothing more than splinters. She had been ladling rice and curry into little metal bowls not even 10 minutes ago. Now it was all twisted into something unrecognizable. Then, under the hum of sirens and the crumbling moan of the city falling apart, she heard it. Not a shout, not a cry, just a breath. Broken. Faint. Coming from the corner where the wall had caved in, pinning what used to be a row of plastic chairs. Latoya dropped to her knees. Dust covered everything, even her own hands, as if the air itself had become earth. And there, under a mess of steel and crumbled concrete, was a hand. Pale. Still. She crawled forward. Hey, can you hear me?" A groan. The man's eyes were shut. His face streaked with grime and blood, lips cracked. His body was trapped beneath a crossbeam that must have weighed as much as a car. For a moment, her breath caught. She should call for help. But no one was left around her now. No one willing to stop. "He's white," someone had said earlier, running past. "Probably a tourist. Let the embassy deal with it." Latoya didn't move. Her eyes met his again. His chest rose, barely. "I'm gonna get you out," she whispered. "Don't you die on me. Not today." She shoved her shoulder against the metal, but it didn't give. She braced her knees, pushed again. Nothing. She screamed, cried, coughed. Finally, she found a piece of broken pipe, wedged it under the edge, and leaned her weight into it with everything she had. With a crunch, the beam shifted just enough. She gripped his arms, cold, slack, and dragged. His shirt tore, his head lolled, but he was breathing. Blood was in her mouth, but she couldn't taste it anymore. Outside, the sky had turned an odd, post-disaster orange. She laid him down in the bed of an old vegetable cart someone had abandoned and began pushing. Through cracked streets, past crying children, past people who didn't stop to ask what she was doing or why. By the time they reached the camp, her arms had gone numb. He didn't wake up for almost 2 days. When he did, it was with a start. Eyes wide, sweat soaked through the cotton blanket she'd found at a shelter nearby. He stared at the ceiling, then at his bandaged hands. Then he looked at her. "Where am I?" he whispered. You're safe, Latoya said, sitting beside him. At a temporary relief camp. You were buried under a building. I found you. He blinked, eyes glassy. What happened? There was an earthquake, she said gently. You've been unconscious. You hit your head pretty bad. You had a fever, too. He raised his hand to his scalp, wincing. I don't remember anything. I don't even know who I am. Latoya hesitated. No ID, no wallet. Nothing in your pockets but a broken watch. You're lucky to be alive. The man looked down at his hands. Jesus. She poured him some water and watched him drink, his fingers trembling. I've been calling you Tom, she said softly. Just to have something to call you. You okay with that? He looked up at her, tired and too lost to argue. Tom's fine. Over the next week, she helped him sit up, then walk, then eat something besides spoonfuls of rice. He didn't talk much at first, just sat on the edge of the cot, staring out through the flapping blue tarpaulin that passed for a wall. The other women in the camp were curious, some kind, some not. You're wasting your time, one said to her. He's white, American or British, I bet. He'll be gone the minute someone comes looking. Latoya didn't answer. She'd heard things like that before, too many times to count. A few men avoided her after that. One even muttered, figures. She thinks saving a white man's life will change hers. But Tom never made her feel small. Not once. He helped set up chairs for class when she taught the children during the day. She gave him a battered notebook, and he started writing random memories that came to him. A dog with a red collar. A lake. A woman's voice singing. Maybe a mother. None of it made sense. At night, she'd return from the kitchen shift exhausted, feet aching, smelling like oil and smoke. And there he'd be, half asleep, but waiting. You okay? He'd ask, voice low. I'm fine, she'd reply, kicking off her shoes. Just tired. You shouldn't have to do all this, he said one night. Taking care of me. I don't even know who I am. You're somebody, she said, stretching out beside him on the cot. You're alive. That counts. He turned his head to look at her. Why did you save me? Her eyes didn't flinch. Because you were breathing. He had nightmares sometimes. Woke up sweating, gasping. Once he sat bolt upright and cried out a name neither of them recognized. She didn't ask. She just held his hand until he drifted off again. One night he said quietly, I think I had a brother. Latoya nodded. Maybe. We'll figure it out. Another night, after a storm had blown half the tarps loose, they sat outside watching the wind ripple across the dark camp. He looked up at her. You didn't have to stay. I know, she said. They didn't touch. They didn't kiss. But something passed between them anyway. Something heavier than words. He looked down at her hands, still bandaged. You're stronger than me. She gave a soft smile. No. Just used to lifting things no one else wants to carry. And that was the truth. He didn't ask questions. Not about the past. Not about what came next. That was the part Latoya found strange. Maybe even comforting. Most people who'd lost everything clawed at their memory like it was oxygen. But not him. Not Tom. He accepted the blank slate like it was a gift. No past to outrun, she teased one morning, handing him a tin plate of boiled rice and greens. You might be the luckiest man here, Tom smiled weakly. Clean slate, huh? He stared at his hands for a long moment. Then why do they still shake? His fingers were still tender from the deep scrapes and broken bones. He couldn't carry heavy loads yet, but he insisted on helping where he could, stacking stools, sweeping out the classroom, peeling vegetables if her shift ran long. I can't just sit around while you're out there busting your back, he said once, halfway through burning his palm on a rusty cooking pot. Latoya dabbed ointment on his hand gently. You're recovering. You're allowed to heal. Yeah, but I feel like if I don't do something, I'll disappear again. Just drift off. You won't, she said without looking up. Not on my watch. Every night, the rain came in sideways through the rip in the tarp above their sleeping area. It soaked the corner of the cot, dripped onto the tin cups, the old shoes they'd tried to dry. Still, they stayed curled close under a donated wool blanket that smelled faintly of gasoline and mildew. They didn't talk much after lights out, not out of discomfort, but because there was something quiet between them that didn't need translation. Once he said, "I think I remember cameras. A lot of flashing. People yelling." She nodded. "Could be anything. Could have been a wedding." Tom shook his head. "No, more like a press thing. Flashes everywhere. I can't see faces. Just noise." She didn't press. Not that night. She had learned early on that memory is a shy thing. It comes only when it's ready. What came more easily was laughter. The kids called him Mr. T, and though he pretended to groan at the nickname, he beamed whenever they called out to him. He made shadow puppets on the tarp wall with his long fingers, telling the most absurd stories. A talking dog with a fear of soap, a bird that couldn't stop hiccuping. It cracked them up. One afternoon, while helping Latoya carry plastic containers of rice back from the temple kitchen, he looked up at the sun beating down hard on the cracked pavement and said, "I don't know who I was before, but I like who I am right now." She glanced at him, almost without turning her head. "You like being sweaty and broke? I like the way you laugh when I spill rice." She laughed just then. "Careful. That kind of charm might get you stuck in Myanmar forever. Maybe that's not such a bad thing." She showed him how to separate glass bottles from metal cans when they scouted the outskirts for recyclables to sell. There wasn't much money in it, but it added up. Enough for soap, sometimes tea. "I'm still not sure how I ended up dragging a white man around these alleys," she joked. Tom smiled, brushing sweat from his brow. "Maybe you have a thing for lost causes." "Maybe," she said, standing to stretch her back. "Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending some lives are worth more than others." He looked at her then, not past her, not through her, but directly, fully. "I don't know who I was," he said slowly, "but if I ever thought like that, I don't want to be him again." In the evenings after her dishwashing shift, they would sit outside the classroom while the children drifted to sleep inside. Candles flickered low. Shadows moved across walls stitched from patchwork tarp and corrugated sheet metal. Latoya would rest her head back against the wall, too tired to speak. Tom would hum something, an old tune he couldn't name. She never asked what song it was. It belonged to him. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe it had just wandered into his mind the same way he'd wandered into hers. Uninvited, uncertain, and strangely right. One night, as thunder rolled in from the west, and the wind made the whole camp whisper, he leaned in close and said, "I don't know if we're anything, you and me. We don't have to name it," she said, eyes half closed. "But it's something." She nodded. "Yeah, it's something." Neither of them reached for the other. Not out of hesitation, but because there was no need to. In a world that had stripped them both of status, history, and future, what they had left was this. Shared moments no one could own or erase. No declarations, no promises, just gestures, carrying an extra tin of soup, folding a blanket, saving the last piece of fried banana for the other. They belonged to the kind of closeness that grows in quiet places, where no one watched, where no one judged, where no one asked if they were supposed to be together. And maybe that was the only place where they could truly be. It started with whispers. Low, clipped words tossed behind Latoya's back like discarded wrappers. She heard them but didn't flinch. After a while it became routine, like the dust in the air, always there, settling where it pleased. "Why's he always sitting with her? She act like she's his nurse or something. She probably thinks he'll marry her once he remembers who he is." They didn't say it outright. No one had to. Her skin said enough for them. The soup shop owner, a hard-faced woman with eyes like rusted nails, finally said it to her face. "You're getting too close to that man. People talk. It's not good for business." Latoya wiped the counter a little harder than necessary. "He's just a friend." "Friend?" The woman scoffed. "You think he sees you as a friend? He's white, American, maybe British. They don't stick around." Latoya didn't answer. She picked up the tray of spoons and turned away. But her hands were shaking. Not from fear, just from the quiet rage of being reminded of her place in a world she'd spent years trying to navigate with dignity. At the camp, one of the boys tugged her shirt during class break. "Miss Latoya, why your skin's dark and his is light?" "Because the sun kisses us all differently," she said softly. "And some of us keep the kiss longer." The kids laughed, but Tom looked over from the corner where he'd been folding blankets, his eyes catching something in hers. She didn't smile back. That night, after her second shift at the restaurant, she came back later than usual. The plastic flap that served as a door had come loose again in the wind. Inside, Tom was sitting with a candle, sketching something in the notebook she'd given him. The pages were full now, names he didn't recognize, dreams he barely remembered, pieces of himself he was trying to gather like broken shells. "You okay?" he asked, watching her untie her shoes with slow fingers. She didn't answer, just sat on the cot and pulled her knees up to her chest. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "I don't know. Just feels like I should be." That cracked something in her. She let out a breath, half sigh, half surrender. "I got told today that I don't belong near you." He looked at her, confused. "By who?" "Doesn't matter," she said. "It's not the first time. Won't be the last." Tom was quiet. He didn't reach for her, just let the silence settle like dust on the floor. Then she said it, not with anger, but with the weight of everything she'd carried alone. "People look at me and see what they want to see. Poor black girl. The help. The burden. Never the beginning of someone's story. Only the end of it." "I don't see you like that." "No," she said, her voice small. "You don't. But what happens when you remember who you are?" He didn't answer. The candle flickered between them. The next morning she got up early. Earlier than usual. Her mother's face had floated into her dreams again, worn and thin. Back in Detroit, miles and miles away, her mother lay in a single bed in a 2-room apartment with bottles of pills lined up like soldiers along the nightstand. Every dollar Latoya sent home was a breath, a heartbeat, a few more days of not dying. She pulled out the old phone she rarely used. The signal was weak, but she managed to text her cousin. "Send more meds this week. I'll transfer when I get paid. Please check on her." Tom stirred in his sleep. She stared at him for a long moment. She remembered once, during the fever, he'd whispered in a voice so hoarse she could barely hear, "Don't leave me." She hadn't. Not then, not yet. That afternoon, her hands slipped while carrying trays of hot broth. Her knees buckled. The owner barked at her. "You need rest or a replacement?" "I need 5 minutes," Latoya snapped, too tired to soften the edge in her voice. The woman stared. "You getting smart with me?" "No," Latoya said, steadying the tray. "Just tired of being quiet." Later, when she walked back to camp with stiff legs and aching feet, she didn't expect anything from anyone. Not sympathy, not kindness. Tom met her at the edge of the tarp, holding out a steaming tin of tea he'd bartered for with some canned goods. "You look beat," he said. She took the cup without a word, sat down. Then, without warning, tears rolled down her cheeks. Not loud, not showy, just slow and real. "I'm fine," she whispered, wiping at her face. "I'm just tired, that's all." Tom didn't speak. He didn't ask her to explain. He didn't say it was going to be okay. Instead, he reached for her hand, held it. Not too tight, not too soft. His thumb brushed her knuckles, And for the first time, his eyes looked at her not with gratitude or dependence or confusion, but something warm, something whole. "You're not alone," he said quietly. She didn't answer. She just held on. It was a hot, sticky morning. One of those days when the sun seemed to hover too close, watching everything. Latoya had tied her headscarf tighter than usual, trying to keep the sweat from dripping into her eyes. She and Tom were hauling plastic buckets of water from the pump down near the edge of the camp. The kids had used up every last drop, painting their names on the tarp walls in chalky blues and yellows. Tom was behind her, limping a little, both arms stretched to balance the sloshing weight. "You ever think we'll get out of here?" he asked. "Out of here and into what?" She shot back, half smiling. "Don't know. Somewhere with real floors. Coffee that doesn't taste like melted shoes." Latoya laughed, a soft and tired sound. "Don't knock it. Those melted shoes kept you alive." True. It was then a click. They didn't see her at first. A young volunteer from some European aid group, hair in a loose braid, camera hanging from her neck like it was part of her body. She wasn't sneaky, just unnoticed, like so many people were in the camp. Her timing, though, was perfect. One photo. Tom looking at Latoya as she balanced the bucket on her hip, their laughter caught mid-breath. Nothing posed, nothing dramatic, just something real, too real. The picture went up online that afternoon. The caption read, "Love after the earth trembled, a quiet bond among the ruins." It was on someone's Twitter, then Reddit, then a blog. It didn't go viral like a meme, but something about it stuck. A white man and a black woman, covered in dust, half smiling, carrying water together like equals. It caught people off guard. By morning, the camp was no longer quiet. Reporters started showing up. Not many at first, just a couple of local news crews. Curious foreigners with badges clipped to their sleeves, asking for the couple. Some held up printed photos. Others flashed their phones in people's faces. "Have you seen this man? Do you know this woman?" Latoya tried to stay out of the way. She told Tom not to go near the front gates. But it was too late. The photo had done what no memory could. It had brought the world to them. A woman in a pale green blouse approached the clinic tent late the next day. She looked out of place, hair styled, eyes scanning, lips pressed in that way people have when they expect to find what they're looking for. She walked straight up to Tom, who'd been helping sort bandages. "Thomas?" she said, like the name was too familiar to say out loud. He turned slowly. "Do I know you?" Her eyes filled. "Oh my God, it's you." He froze. His hands dropped to his sides. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't—" "You're Thomas Ashford. Your family's been looking for you for 6 months. Your face is everywhere." The air went out of the tent like a popped balloon. Behind them, Latoya stood still, holding a tray of boiled gauze. She didn't move, didn't blink. It happened quickly after that. First, a black SUV. Then 2 uniformed men. An older man who didn't speak to Tom, only to the woman. A satellite phone pressed to someone's ear. Helicopters overhead, loud enough to shake the tin roofs. Tom sat on the edge of a folding cot, staring into space, his hands clenched together. "They're saying he swallowed. "They say I'm part of a media company, that I own something. A board, a house in London, another in San Diego." Latoya stayed quiet. "They say I disappeared after a boat trip with my brother, that I went overboard. They thought I drowned, and now they want you back," she said, voice low. He looked at her. "What if I don't want to go?" She didn't answer, because it didn't matter what he wanted. When they came to take him, it wasn't with handcuffs or drama. It was with soft words and expensive suits. One man offered Latoya money, handed her an envelope. "You've been kind. We'll make sure you're comfortable." She didn't take it, just shook her head. "He's not a dog I picked off the street." The man frowned. You should be proud. Not many people would have done what you did. I didn't do it to be thanked. Tom turned around once before stepping into the SUV. His eyes searched for her, found her across the lot, standing behind the water pump, arms folded like she was trying to hold herself together. He didn't wave. He just looked at her, like he was memorizing her face. And then the doors shut. The camp went back to its rhythm. But something had gone missing, like a note dropped from a familiar tune. People still lined up for rice. Children still ran barefoot through the mud. But Latoya felt hollow, like her name had been whispered away. Later that week, a boy ran up to her with a flyer someone had dropped. It had Tom's photo on it, clean-shaven, suit and tie, hair trimmed. "Is this your friend?" he asked. She took the flyer gently and tucked it into her pocket. "No, baby," she said, voice soft. "That man's someone else." The headlines called it a miracle. Media air found alive after 6 months missing, the Ashford story. Photos showed Tom, or Thomas now, walking carefully down the steps of a private hospital in Bangkok. A crisp white shirt tucked into clean slacks, his hair neatly combed. A nurse held his elbow like he might fall. Behind them stood 2 men in tailored suits and 1 woman in designer sunglasses, looking bored. Latoya saw it on a folded newspaper someone left behind on the back table of the soup shop. She didn't read it. She just stared at the photo, then turned it face down and went back to folding napkins. It was easier that way. In the city, Thomas Ashford was being stitched back into the life he was born into. Doctors checked his memory. Lawyers handled his name. Someone in PR asked him to give a speech, which he declined. His brother Everett, who had once told the police there was no chance Thomas could have survived, now gave interviews with carefully practiced tires. "It was a boating accident," Everett said. "He hit his head and must have drifted. It's a miracle. We're just so thankful to have him home." Thomas didn't speak on camera. He sat quietly during those moments, nodding when needed, eyes focused on something far beyond the lights. Latoya, meanwhile, was back to wiping down tables at the edge of the night market, slipping into a rhythm that asked nothing of her. The owner didn't mention Tom again. Neither did the customers. Not even the woman who'd once said, "He'll leave you the second he remembers." There was nothing to talk about. She finished her shifts, walked back to camp, laid her tired body down on the same cot they used to share. The tarpaulin still flapped the same way in the wind. Nothing had changed. Except her. Some nights, she would sit beside the children and help them with words. Cat, hat, apple. Some of the younger ones still asked about Tom. "Is Mr. T coming back?" one girl asked, fiddling with the frayed end of her sweater. Latoya smiled gently. He had to go back to his family. "Don't you miss him?" She paused, then nodded. "Yeah, I do. But missing someone's not always enough to make them stay." The girl looked confused but didn't ask again. Word around the camp spread slowly, in murmurs. One boy said he saw Tom on a billboard. Another said his face was on a phone commercial. The story stretched in every direction. He was a prince, a spy, an actor, a billionaire. Some said Latoya had made it all up. Others claimed she was pregnant and hiding it. She ignored them all, but sometimes she still waited. At the edge of the market, on the back steps of the classroom. Just a breath too long, as if something might shift. As if he might step out of the shadows, carrying a can of soup like nothing had happened. Weeks passed. Her hands grew rough again, and the skin on her elbows cracked from too many hours leaning over dishes. She stopped writing her cousin in Detroit, except to ask for updates about her mother's health. The money was tight, but she kept sending it. One night, walking home, she passed by a radio playing near a tea stall. The voice was clipped, British, polished. Thomas Ashford released a brief statement today, thanking medical staff and local authorities for their tireless efforts. No mention was made of the woman who reportedly cared for him during his months in hiding. The family declined further comment. She stopped. Just for a second. Then she walked on. Back at camp, the children were putting on a play they'd written themselves. It was mostly nonsense. Talking rabbits, a tree that played the violin. But one girl, maybe 5 years old, stood in the back holding a handmade sign that read, "Hope is the last thing you lose." Latoya didn't cry. She just smiled and clapped and helped them pack up after. That night, she lay awake longer than usual. The cot felt colder. She turned toward the empty space beside her, curled up tight, and whispered, "You could have at least said goodbye." No one answered, but the wind, soft and quiet, rustled the tarp like it was listening. He remembered everything, not all at once, and not like in the movies. There was no thunderclap, no dramatic gasp in front of a mirror. It came in bits, sharp, uneven, uncomfortable. A teak deck, a fight, raised voices, Everett's hand on his shoulder, too firm. The sound of something cracking against the back of his skull. Then the water, cold, endless. He remembered going overboard. He remembered thinking, this is it. And then, nothing, except her. That came back first. Not his childhood home or the name of his private school. Not the board meetings or press tours. Just her, kneeling beside him in a tent that leaked when it rained. Her voice humming a tune she never named. Her hands, always warm even when everything else was cold. That was the memory he trusted. Everything else felt like a costume someone else had picked out. They called a press conference. Set it up at the Ashford Foundation headquarters, with a background that read, "Hope, recovered." There was a podium, chairs for family, a media line out the door. All the big names were there. CNN, BBC, even a guy from Vanity Fair. They handed him a script, polished, polite. "Just thank the donors," his brother said. "Keep it vague. Focus on the future. Don't dwell on the, rescue part." Thomas read it once, then folded it neatly and set it on the table. "I'm not doing this," he said. Everett blinked. "Excuse me? I said I'm not doing this. You want to embarrass the entire company? I want to tell the truth." Everett's voice dropped. "You think anyone wants to hear about a black woman wiping soup off your face in some third-world tent? Be serious." Thomas looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, he didn't feel small in front of his brother. Just tired. "I'm leaving." He slipped out the back while reporters argued about seat assignments. No driver, no security. Just a backpack, a ball cap, and a train ticket to the edge of the city. From there, he paid a motorbike driver in crumpled bills and rode 3 hours through the choking smog and dust roads until the skyline disappeared behind banana trees and low tin roofs. He didn't know exactly where she'd be, but he remembered the path they used to take after her shifts, past the chipped wall with children's drawings, around the old water pump that leaked no matter how tight you turned it. And there she was, in the clearing near the tarp classroom, kneeling beside a small group of children, correcting their grammar with a smile. Her hair was loose, blowing in the breeze. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hands were smudged with chalk. It hit him all at once. How far he'd come to see something so simple. Latoya looked up slowly, sensing the shift in air before she even saw him. She didn't gasp, didn't run, just watched as he walked toward her, his steps unsure. He stopped a few feet away. Neither of them said anything for a while. "I went back," he said finally, "to that life. It didn't fit." She nodded. "I remembered everything. The boat, my brother, the money, my name." Her eyes didn't flinch. "And I remembered you. That first night. The way you looked at me when I didn't even know who I was." Latoya stood slowly, wiped her hands on her skirt. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but her voice wasn't cold. "I know. What do you want?" He swallowed. "To start again, if you'll let me." She tilted her head, studying him like a riddle. "And what would we be, Tom? Or do I call you Thomas now?" He looked down at his feet. I don't know. I just know I felt more like myself sleeping under a tarp beside you than I ever did wearing a tailored suit in a house I can't even remember." She didn't speak. A child tugged her sleeve. "Miss Latoya, can we finish the story?" She touched the girl's shoulder gently. "In a minute, baby." Then she turned back to him and smiled. It wasn't a yes, wasn't a no, just a moment. And in that moment, it was enough. They didn't need a ceremony. No rings, no vows, no signatures. Just a small room near the river, a mattress on the floor, and a kettle that hissed whenever it boiled. It was enough. Tom walked away from the boardroom before they could hand him a title again. "I'm not interested in running a company," he told the lawyers. "Keep the shares. Give the decisions to someone else." He didn't want to own anymore. He wanted to build. Latoya said nothing when he came back with a key to a house no bigger than the storage room of her old soup shop. The floors were cracked tile. The ceiling leaked when the rain came too fast. But it had a patch of dirt out back where she could plant things. That was more than she'd ever had. They used a plastic table as a desk, a few plastic chairs. He painted the walls pale blue, though the color faded quickly in the sun. Every morning, she tended to her tomatoes while he boiled water for tea. Every afternoon, he walked to the edge of the neighborhood where they'd rented an old, crumbling building and began teaching the kids there how to patch roofs, fix radios, sew buttons back onto shirts. He called it the Miriam Center, after Latoya's mother. They didn't tell people much about their past. In the neighborhood, they were just Tom and Latoya, the strange but kind couple, him with his awkward Burmese, her with her quiet, steady smile. Some people gossiped, but most just waved when they passed. When you lived by the river, people had better things to worry about than skin color or where you used to live. One evening, a woman from across the alley knocked on their door with a basket of mangoes. "For your daughter," she said. Latoya looked confused. "We don't have—" But Tom stepped into the doorway holding a small, quiet girl with big eyes and no shoes. "We do now," he said simply. They found her on the steps of the training center. No note. Just a string bracelet around her wrist and a cough that rattled like gravel in her chest. Latoya wanted to take her to the police. "There are procedures," she said. "We don't know anything about her." But the girl clung to her sleeve like it was life itself. That night, while the rain tapped the roof and steam rose from a bowl of soup, Latoya looked across the room and said, "We can't save everyone." Tom nodded. "Just the ones we find." They named her Hope. Hope didn't speak for the first month. She watched everything, eyes darting between the two of them, as if waiting for one to vanish. Tom let her help paint the steps outside. Latoya taught her how to braid her own hair. One day, Hope drew a picture in the dirt with a stick. 3 people, 1 house, a sun with too many rays. "She sees us," Latoya said softly. Tom crouched beside the little girl. "You're home now, kiddo." Hope blinked, then smiled, just barely. They didn't have much. Sometimes dinner was plain rice and pickle. Sometimes the power went out for hours. They kept candles in a coffee can under the sink. When the mosquitoes came, they shared one net between the 3 of them, tangled together in the middle of the bed. But there was laughter. Real, deep laughter. From burned toast. From frogs in the shower. From Hope insisting she could teach their neighbor's cat to speak. They didn't talk about race anymore. Not because it stopped mattering, but because it wasn't the thing that defined their days. Not here. Not now. One morning a vendor at the market asked, "You 2 married?" Latoya looked at Tom. "Sort of," she said, smiling. The vendor laughed. "Good enough." The river rose in the monsoon. Their roof leaked again. But they fixed it with pieces of tarp and leftover tin. At night, they sat out front with lukewarm tea and watched the stars blink between cloud breaks. Tom leaned back one night and said, "Do you ever miss it?" "Miss what?" "The old life." She sipped her tea. "No." "Not even a little?" She paused. "I miss hot showers and clean socks, but not the way things made me feel. Tom nodded. Yeah, me neither. He reached for her hand and found it without looking. And that, more than anything else, was the life they'd built. Without titles, without applause. Just presence. Just choosing each other again and again, even in the quietest moments. It wasn't a bestseller, and he hadn't expected it to be. Tom published it through a small house in Manila. No agent, no fanfare. Just a pale cover, a black title, The One Who Saw Me. It wasn't about the accident, or the inheritance, or the 6 months missing. It was about the woman who fed him when he didn't know how to feed himself. The one who said nothing when he had nothing. About the way her hands had steadied his fever, and the way her voice made the air feel less like a storm. He didn't name her, not directly, but anyone who read it would know. Latoya never read the whole thing. She said she didn't need to. I already lived it, she told him, folding laundry on the porch. Besides, you make me sound nicer than I was. He grinned. You're plenty nice. She gave him a look. You only say that because I haven't burned dinner this week. He leaned in, kissed the side of her face. I say that because it's true. Hope peeked her head through the doorway. Mom, Dad's lying again. Latoya smiled. I know, baby, but it's the sweet kind of lie. That spring, a human rights organization invited Latoya to speak at a forum in Yangon. Someone had read about her in a footnote in Tom's book. They wanted her to talk about race, survival, disparity. They asked for slides. They offered to pay. She wore her cleanest dress, the blue one with the loose thread at the hem. No jewelry. She spoke without a microphone, to a room full of strangers who smelled like expensive perfume and wore shoes that never touched mud. I'm not an expert, she began. I'm not a professor or a writer. She paused, looked around the room, took a breath. I just have a story. A woman once pulled a man out of a building after it collapsed. She didn't ask who he was. She didn't check his wallet. She just saw someone breathing and thought, that's reason enough. People shifted in their seats. Some looked uncomfortable. And later, when they found out the man was rich, powerful, important, they didn't believe her. Because she didn't look like someone who saves people. She looked like me. A long silence followed. Then a single clap. Then a few more. Eventually the room stood. But she didn't smile like someone proud. Just nodded. Quiet and steady. Afterward, someone asked if she wanted to do a book. She said no. Someone else asked if she ever felt like she missed out on a bigger life. Latoya blinked. What bigger life? Back home, Hope was waiting with a picture she'd drawn. 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small. All holding hands. Above them, a house with a crooked roof, a tomato plant, and a sun. That's us, she explained, pointing. That's our house. And this, she tapped the sun. That's love. Tom crouched down beside her. Looks about right. Later that night, the rain came down hard. One of those storms that made the roof feel like a drum. They lit candles and pushed the bed closer to the middle of the room where it stayed dry. Tom had burned the pancakes, again. Hope laughed, mouth full. Dad, you made charcoal cakes. Latoya leaned back on her elbows, shaking her head. You're lucky I'm not yelling. Hope scrambled over, climbed into her lap. You never yell. Latoya kissed the top of her head. I yell in my heart. You just can't hear it. Tom lifted his tin cup. To survival, Latoya corrected him. To choosing each other. Hope raised her spoon. To pancakes that taste like tires. And then they laughed, long and loud, as the rain kept falling. There was no ending to their story. Just more days. Some with thunder. Some with too much sun. Some with burned breakfast and missed buses and unexpected kindness. But as long as they had each other, one brown hand, one white hand, and one tiny hand in between, it was enough. Because love doesn't come from blood, or names, or wealth. It comes from staying when you don't have to. You can forget what school you went to. You can forget the city where you were born, the year you got your first job, the street where everything once fell apart. But you never forget the moment someone saw you, really saw you. Not as what you had or what you lost, just as a person, alive, aching, trying. That kind of moment stays with you. It becomes the spine of who you are. Sometimes, it begins with something so small, you almost miss it. A half-broken loaf of bread. A hand reaching back through the smoke. A girl with dark skin and calloused hands who doesn't ask where you're from, just whether you're still breathing. Love, the real kind, doesn't care what color your skin is. It doesn't ask for your last name or your tax bracket. It asks if you're willing to stay when things get quiet, to choose someone without applause, to build something out of what's left. So maybe that's the world we dream about. Not perfect, not polished, but tender. Where courage doesn't wear a uniform. Where kindness looks like a small tin roof, 3 people laughing over burnt pancakes, and a child who no longer has to ask why her skin is different. If this story moved you, share it, because love shouldn't need permission. And bravery can begin with a crust of bread, a hand in the dark, or a roof patched with hope. We'll see you again in our next story, where another quiet moment might hold a powerful lesson. If this one moved you, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next truth waiting to be told.